Chapter 1. The Early Years Born to Lead. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22, verse 6. You are a leader. When you do well, everyone will do well. Your brothers and sisters look up to you, and your family is depending on you to carry the family's name. These were the words my parents bombarded me with during my early childhood, growing up in the Kambuzuma township of Zimbabwe. I'm the first of 7 children, 5 girls and 2 boys. The firstborn of proud parents Ida Sanganza Matlatini and Benjamin Matlatini. My parents were married in 1965. At that time, we lived in a 1-room house in Mbare and then moved to a 2-room home in Kambuzuma Township. As I reflect back on those years, I can still see the house. It holds many special memories of my formative years. Those were often difficult days, but my mother was determined to groom her children for the challenges of tomorrow. Although we did not have much, we never went hungry. As a young child, I did not understand the gravity of our circumstances enough to appreciate my mother's handling of the situation. Looking back, I now sympathize with my mother. But boy, to me she seemed like a mean old lady. As children, we suffered the wrath of my mother for even the slightest infraction. My mother did not spare the rod. She believed that to save the child and raise fine, outstanding people, she needed to use the rod to correct us. For example, I remember being whipped on one occasion for refusing to take off my physical education uniform. In spite of the soundness of my reason, my mother was adamant about rules and regulations. We were supposed to remove our school uniforms immediately after school. That day, however, I was celebrating my school's victory in an athletic competition and had worn my uniform after school as a gesture of support. Yet my mother would not have any of that. She was afraid I would destroy the one uniform that I had. After all, there was no money to buy a replacement uniform if the one I was wearing was destroyed. Today, however, I understand my mother's frustrations. I understand her anger. She was prepared to do anything possible to protect the little that we had. She did not want to spend the few dimes she had to her name to replace a uniform that was damaged because of my juvenile indiscretions. Her reaction to my behavior could also be chalked up to her pride. She did not want her neighbors to know that we were poor. Our plight kept my mother crying day in and day out as she struggled to raise her children. As we grew older, my siblings and I would walk through the neighborhood selling mangoes, bananas, and oranges. Although my mother tells me how quiet I was as a child, I remember making my contribution to the upkeep of the family. Throughout our struggles, my mother constantly reminded me about the importance of education. She used to say, if you do not do well in school, you'll become a nobody. She made me feel that I had no choice but to do well academically because I wanted to be somebody. It wasn't easy, but I worked as hard as I possibly could to make it. As I write these words, an incident jumps out at me. It was a rainy day, and because we had no transportation at our disposal, we had to walk to school. In our household, as I have mentioned, education was seen as our ticket to a better life. Unfortunately, by the time we got to school, we were drenched and our teachers denied us entry into the classroom. As wet as we were, we felt like we were involuntarily imprisoned in the bathroom, where we were told to stay until we dried up because we could not go back in the class. We attempted wringing our uniforms dry, the only way we knew how, but it didn't work. I asked my sister Star about this incident, and she remembered it like yesterday. We haven't talked about it in a long time. But sure enough, we both cried as we recalled this incident. We were sad and embarrassed because we were the only ones who were sitting in the bathroom trying to dry ourselves. When we shared our experiences with our mother, she was devastated. At the time, she was and still is a praying woman, a woman who believes that God will have mercy on her and her family. Her faith, I believe, enabled her to give us a solid, principled foundation on which to grow. We were and still are a praying family, a family that benefited from my mother's strong and unwavering faith. One of my mother's favorite prayers was, "Lord, let my tears be a blessing to my children." Hence the book title, Beyond the Tears, Bruised but Not Broken. In Shona, it is pronounced, "Misodzi yangu ngaive chipo kuvana vangu." I took those words literally and have always believed that there is nothing I cannot do because my path was prayed for and anointed by my mother's words. My involvement in church and community activities kept me focused on the positive things that life had to offer. I was an altar girl. I participated in Sunday school. I served as a youth leader, and I became a member of the Girls' Brigade. My involvement in these activities helped me tremendously. They opened my eyes to what might one day be instead of the harsh reality of my family's poverty. While we were in Kambuzuma, we went to bed most evenings after consuming porridge and chicken feet when my father was not home. I remember those days you could get a big slice of meat for 20 cents and we would cut that one piece into many pieces to make stew. I remember Mother sending me to the butcher because I was so friendly that whenever I went, I brought back a larger piece than my siblings. To expand our menu and improve upon our plight, Mother started growing corn and sweet potatoes and offering them for sale. My sisters would think I have selective memory if I do not mention that our first attempt at entrepreneurship as children started with us selling mangoes on the streets in Kambuzuma. I remember us yelling "mangoes" together and feeling very sad, embarrassed, and defeated when we didn't sell much. My sister Star was very persistent, but I was shy and easily embarrassed and did not want anything to do with selling mangoes on the streets. I did not want anything to do with being in the fields either. So my mother always used to tell me that I had better get an education, as I would amount to nothing otherwise, since I did not want to sell food or be a worker in the cornfields. I laugh about it today, but it's true. I don't enjoy being in the cornfields. I, however, love selling. I guess because I've worked hard to overcome my shyness, I'm able to sell anything. I bet you I can sell you more mangoes than you anticipate buying if I sold you mangoes today. Yes, my intention is to make sure I now sell at a higher scale than when I sold produce on the streets of Kambuzuma. But I learned some of my marketing skills back then. Even though my shyness might have made me appear distanced from it all, I love a plaque in my home that reads, "Everything I have learned, I learned from my mother." Author unknown. Indeed, if my mother had not pushed us to sell, we all would not have the business skills we have today. They don't teach you real-life experience in business school. My sister has gone on to own her own very successful business, a beauty salon, creative hair design, and beauty supply in Massachusetts. Meanwhile, we all look forward to the days when Dad was home. Whenever he was there, we ate very well until he left home again, and everything went back to not having much. However, it would not be much longer before things took a turn for the better. That was when Dad decided to go to a real estate school to become a realtor. He was now home all the time, and it was during that time that Mother decided to learn how to knit sweaters. Although Mother came from a very prominent family, marrying my father meant that she was on her own. In other words, she could not now seek help from her own father, Freddy Kadoko Sanganza, a former prominent businessman in the Mutare and Bare townships. She, however, never forgot the entrepreneurial lessons she had learned from her father. She took those lessons and opened up a sweater knitting business of her own. Her business and Dad's real estate business did so well, we were able to change our place of residence. We moved to a community called Waterfalls, a community in which Mahlatinis became well known. Father for his real estate, mother for knitting sweaters, and us children went on to become top models with Silhouettes and Zolly's modeling schools before we left the country to come to the USA. Thinking back, I believe that there's a great merit in what Joyce Maynard said. It's not only children who grow, parents do too. As much as we watch to see what our children do with their lives, they are watching us to see what we do with ours. I can't tell my children to reach for the sun. All I can do is reach for it. My parents struggled, as most parents do when starting a new family. What made the difference was their belief in hard work and their faith. They believed they could create a better life for themselves and for their family. I find myself saying if they could work that hard and get us out of Kambuzuma, I sure can get them to a higher ground now that the tables have turned. The money is gone and the businesses have all been closed down. My father always said that education was power and that education opens doors. I witnessed the change in him after he became a realtor, which was a result of education. His wish for his children was for us to go to school and wait to start a family, stating we could start a family at any time. Well, I took him seriously, and being my parents' pleaser, I believed family could wait. Or so I believed, blissfully unaware of the biological clock information I learned about many years later. My father never wanted his children to rush into marriage to escape poverty, the way so many of our friends had done. Many people will remember me and my sisters as top models with Zollies and Silhouettes. Our parents enrolled us in a modeling school to keep us from going astray. Both Mom and Dad said that being models would also help to groom us for the business world. They were right. Modeling school, fashion shows, commercials, and beauty pageants all made a difference. My siblings and I managed to divert ourselves from starting families at an early age. Instead, we put our focus on pursuing education first. In Zimbabwe, there's a term naka, which refers to the property or monies that one leaves for their family when they pass on. My parents used to constantly tell us that they had nothing to leave us when they died. They hammered into us the importance of education, stating that it would provide the means for us to succeed. Education, they felt, was their contribution to what we would accomplish in our lives so that we could one day leave Naka for our own children and their grandchildren. Beyond the tears, bruised but not broken, traces my humble journey. It exposes you to the road I have traveled and shows you how I have made it my mission to live a life that was fertilized by my mother's tears. It is a book that teaches you the power of prayer, resiliency, dedication, hard work, and faith. Let my tears be a blessing to my children was my mother's prayer, which I attribute as one of the main reasons we are all doing well today. What follows is my story through my father's eyes, who I have no doubt loves all his children and probably had no indication or any clue how much pain his decisions would cause. I truly believe he had no idea that his actions would scar us, his children, for such a long time. I grew up being Daddy's girl, but I was so hurt and disappointed with his decision because He's the one that taught us that polygamy was a dumb idea. He said people destroy their families for nothing, and yet he ended up doing the very same thing. I asked him to write an introduction that I could include in my book, and he wrote the following heartfelt letter. Stembile, which is my full name, you were my firstborn, and from the moment you could sit down and crawl around, I knew that there was something special about you. I knew you would be a leader. At an early age, you became very responsible. You displayed leadership skills far beyond your years. Because of what we saw in you, your mother and I reminded you time and time again about being a leader. I was not home much to see how difficult it was for you and your mother, so I'll tell you what I remember of you from whenever I was home. I will also share with you the growth I have seen in you over the years. I am convinced, however, that others might ask, how could an infant show leadership? If I were to be asked that question, I would say that leadership in children is displayed through their independence. As a child, you displayed a high level of independence. Unlike your siblings, you cried a lot, yet you would stop crying as soon as I held you in my hands. I'm not sure if you did it to attract attention, my attention, but you did it as often as you could get away with it. Nonetheless, as soon as your crying episodes were over, you would immediately start arranging, destroying, and rearranging the toys that were placed before you on the floor. Other times, I would put you outside in the yard on a blanket. On the blanket, I would put some sand all around you for your protection and comfort. Then you would go around and round on the blanket playing with your toys. As poor as we were back then, we could not afford modern toys. Instead, I used sticks and spoons as toys for you. While your mother worked on her household chores, you would arrange, rearrange, and rearrange those items. When there was no one else to play with, you were comfortable playing by yourself. Sometimes you would play by yourself for hours. As I look back over the years, I remember your mother yelling at the top of her voice, "Where's my daughter?" Those were the times when you went out of her sight for a brief moment. But there you were, playing quietly, everything would be normal again. Away from home, you used to protect other children at school. You protected them from bullies. You were able to stop the bullies, not because of your physical power, but because of the leadership skills you possessed as a child. Those same skills are serving you well today as an adult. I would be the first to tell you that there was more to you than your independence. You were a prankster. You used to tease your mother and me regularly. In addition to your aptitude for pranks, you were a very inquisitive child. You questioned everything. No matter where we were and what time of day it was, you were always awake, asking questions after question. You ignored the fact that everyone else was asleep. It was then that I realized that you had a gift for speaking. You loved everyone, and you were not afraid to engage anyone in conversation. You were growing into a very confident young woman. For example, when you turned 18, I introduced you to real estate, and you grasped the art of selling immediately. Because you connected easily with people, selling came easy for you. To me, you've always been a go-getter. Therefore, I wasn't surprised to learn that you were pursuing a doctoral degree. In fact, I was thrilled. I always knew you would do it. More than that, I am so proud of who you have become, and I have no doubt that you will use your background, training, and experiences to educate, motivate, and inspire others to live their life to the fullest. I love you, Dad. Lessons learned. I learned at this phase that our environment shapes who we become, but we change at any moment when our pasts no longer benefit us. Coming to America was a rude awakening because I've had to deal with a melting pot of cultures, personalities, and backgrounds. Having the flexibility to adjust to do whatever is necessary legally to get where you want to go is key. I know of many people that are stuck to their childhood, so they swear they will not take any necessary actions to better their lives because they do not believe in it. I learned that parents are human too. They too make mistakes or rescind on their word, as my father did when he married 2 more wives after my mother. I learned to separate my mother's jealousies and pain over this rejection so that I could move on and start my own family. A dose of motivation. I want to share with you one of my favorite Christian cards that I bought from a local bookstore over 20 years ago when I came to this country. This card has gotten me through tough times, times of self-doubt and fear. I hope it'll be a source of motivation to you as well. God's promises. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Joshua 1 verse 5. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you and watch over you. Psalm 32 verse 8. I will sustain you and I rescue you. Isaiah 46 verse 4. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah 41 verse 10. I will be with you and will watch over you wherever you go. Genesis 28 verse 15. I have engraved you on the palms of my hand. Isaiah 49 verse 16. I will walk with you and among you and be your God, and you will be my people. Leviticus 26 verse 12. These, as well as many other Bible verses, strengthen me when I'm weak, as I have no doubt God's handprint is all over whatever is happening to me at that moment. I am grateful for His promises, for I have learned His will, and not my will be done at all times.